So why don't your videos look cinematic? Well, there's a million possible reasons why, but I think the biggest hindrance isn't that you're pushing your images too far, it's that you're not pushing them far enough. So what I'm about to do is show you a few ways you can actually get better results when grading your footage. Now, I'll be using DaVinci Resolve, but the software is pretty interchangeable for the most part because we're talking about hacking our mental approach to grading, and that's going to apply regardless of what tools you're using. So I think part of the why behind not achieving cinematic looks, at least when the footage is shot really well, is that we tend to go through the motions. Even if we don't mean to, we can't really help it. We're just wired that way. We like to use the tools we're comfortable with. We like to put our highlights, midtones, and shadows where we're comfortable. But if you look at the work that's at the level we aspire to create at, you'll likely see that it breaks all the rules we thought we were supposed to abide by. So how do we break that deadly cycle that can sometimes hinder our ability to create beautiful grades? First, I want to emphasize 2 points that I think have helped me the most and that have helped keep me out of creative ruts when it comes to color grading. Just about any time you learn something in this field, do not assume it's a rule. Go and apply it for yourself, see how it works. If you like the results, great, but it is not a one-size-fits-all industry. And to piggyback on top of that, there's multiple ways to achieve any one task in Resolve, or just about any software for that matter. So if you're adding contrast, for example, you're not just limited to the contrast slider. You can add contrast by using the curves, drop in a LUT, color space transform, the list goes on. Explore the software, try different methods, and then gather observations based on those results. And then in the future, you can use those observations to make better creative decisions for the project you're working on at that given time. So enough chatting, let's get to the meat of this video, and that is how to get better results when color grading, how to break that cycle and make your work stand out. So what I'm going to do is hop into ArtGrid, which is my stock footage provider of choice. And I'm just going to pick a random shot that I like, that I think has potential, and I'm going to assign it a general theme or a story. It's totally subjective, and it's just based on the way I feel when looking at that clip. And then I'm going to grade that clip with the story in mind and see what I come up with. Then I'm going to reset everything, pull up a reference image from a movie that I think shares a similar vibe, a similar mood, and then I'm going to start over from scratch, completely redo the entire clip's grade using the reference image as my guide. Then we're going to open up the original grade and compare the two end results. We are using this reference image as a way of breaking our habitual cycles when it comes to color grading. Let's jump in. All right, so now we're here in ArtGrid. I'm going to be picking out the shot I'm going to use for this tutorial in real time. You guys are going to see that. I'm over here in the video themes, and let's just go with lifestyle because I think that's going to keep it pretty broad. And scrolling through, I think this one definitely stands out. So let's go ahead and add this one to our cart. I'm kind of getting vibes of like the summertime romance, and I think that's going to be really interesting to play along with. So we're going to go ahead and bring this clip into Resolve, and I'm going to start creating a look just based off of my own preferences and what I think will work best. Like I said, the story I'm kind of getting from this is some kind of summer romance. It may not fit exactly based on the shot we have here, but I think that aesthetic and that look will work pretty well. So I'm not exactly going to take my time and grade this shot as if it was being presented for a real-time project, because the purpose of this video is to make a point about how using references can lead us to different results. So my tendencies are just to go straight to my contrast and pivot, use my primary wheels, and start building the final contrast of my shot pretty early on, and then work with colors. And I tend to just pull my shadows towards teal, highlights and midtones sometimes towards a little more orange, and then I'll just kind of tweak from there. But you'll see whenever we bring in that reference image later on, which at this point I don't know what it's going to be yet. I'm going to pick that later, but I have complete confidence it's going to lead me down a different path than what I'm about to do now. So like I said, for this image, let's just go ahead and start adding some contrast, and we'll use our pivot to give us more details in the shadows there. And again, we're using our primary wheels. We're going to take our lift, pull this down a little bit, not too far, and we gamma up. Not even sure if I've made any changes there, and then gain up just a little bit to optimize a little more of the waveform. But I think the look I want, I don't want it to be maxing out. So now that I have my basic contrast there, I'm going to go ahead and play a little bit with my curves and see if I can get anything else interesting out of this. Adding a serial node there, and I think we'll start to push some pink maybe into the gamma, and same with the lift. I'm gonna go ahead and make this a parallel node because I'm gonna do some more qualifications. I'm gonna do some log adjustments below it, and then I'm also gonna pull out the skin tones and make them a little bit more natural. I think I'm gonna take the gain towards teal, which is kind of the opposite of what I usually do, but it's looking pretty interesting. So now we're gonna go into our third node. I'm gonna go into my log wheels, and then over in the parade, we can see that green is sitting really low, and I wanna kind of balance out my shadows here. So I'm gonna pull it towards green. So as I pull it towards green, you can see it's balancing out there in the bottom. I don't want it to be perfectly black. I still want a little bit of a pinkish cast in the lower range there, but that's looking pretty good. I like the way that looks. I'll go back into my second node, my top look node, and I'm gonna pull the gamma down just a little bit. And lift up. So now just in these two nodes, what I've done, very different overall color cast. So because there's so many different skin tones here, I'm just gonna go ahead and use my 6-vector presets. So we're gonna go over to color, presets, and 6-vector red. Let's see what we got there. Definitely going to take a little bit of work. Let's move this center point around. Now we are getting all the skin tones here. I like that. Let's denoise it a bit since I don't even have any denoising applied. I'm still getting a little bit too much of the sky, so I'm going to pull that luminance down, and that's going to start helping me be a little more precise with the qualification here. Now let's go ahead and fix some of these skin tones here. They're a little bit too pink. We're going to pull a little bit of green into our gamma, which I just made the mistake of doing with my panel. I got to do it with the mouse so you guys can follow along. And we're just pulling this. Let's see, I don't want to saturate it too much, but they do need to be less green because you can kind of see that green coming through for whatever reason there in the skin. So the lift is actually doing a really good job of getting rid of that green cast. And we're not going to see too much happening with the gain here. All right, that's pretty good. Super small adjustments, as you can see. But let's go ahead and take this overall node and go into the node key tab, and we're going to pull the gain down a little bit. And that's just going to change the opacity of this node so that the effects of this node are a little bit less intense. I'm also going to go into our first node here, and let's just see if we can work with the tint to get the skin tones a little bit closer to natural. And pull our tint to magenta, and then pull down our temperature. Maybe pull our temperature up, and then using our lift, we're going to pull a little bit more towards blue. And let's see what we're looking at. All right, so that's not a bad look, especially just for doing it in a few quick nodes. I could certainly go more and more in depth with this, but the point of this is to show you how different my steps are going to be when using a reference versus going off of my own intuition. So this next part is why I think you guys should subscribe to the channel right now. Go ahead and go into Safari or whatever your preferred web browser is, and then go to film-grab.com. And here you're going to find tons and tons of high quality stills that you can confidently use in your referencing. You can search the name of the movie to see if they have it. There's also, you can browse by artist based on the director, the cinematographer, category, films A to Z. I like to just go straight into my favorite cinematographers. I'm going to go with Roger Deakins for this one because why not? And let's go with Intolerable Cruelty. Let's go ahead and look through these stills. You can pick one image alone and download that single image, or you can just download the entire gallery here at the bottom. So super handy. Definitely go check these guys out and then support them on Patreon because they do so much great work. All right, so I'm looking for something that's going to be very warm, very summer-ish, and okay, this is a good image. This will be a good one to reference. We're going to go ahead and download this one. And the shot you pull up as your reference doesn't have to be something that specifically matches the exact location or framing or composition. It can be anything, as long as it's able to influence your decisions when it comes to contrast, your tonal curve, some of the colors you may want to push into any specific region. That's the main goal. We're going to make a new version, and I'm just going to reset everything. Now I'll go into our gallery and select our still. I'm going to go in and use contrast and pivot once again. And I'm going to bring a little bit more shadow detail up in this one than the last one. I'm also going to add one node before this. And here, let's go ahead and pull our gain down just slightly, but bring our gamma up. And then our lift, we'll pull that down. Now, one thing I see is that most of the shadows in our reference, they're sitting a little bit higher, but then the black point where it gets really, really dark, that just kind of jumps off. So that's why I'm going to bring the lift up some more. And then we'll jump into our log in our second node, log wheels, and take our shadows and pull them right down. And that's going to kind of match that look that we see in the right. It's a very different tonal curve. The shadows kind of drop off and then they go straight to black. So already, we're kind of getting it closer in terms of contrast. Now, obviously there's like no saturation here, so we'll go ahead and pump that up. I'm using the panel for that, and that alone made a big, big difference. I mean, already just looking at the contrast between the two, like this is the first look I made just, off the top of my head in just a few minutes, and look at the difference between the two. I didn't really add any saturation to the original image. This still is the reason I was like, oh, it definitely needs a whole lot more saturation. That's what pushed me to make that decision. Moving on, let's go into we're gonna name this one our look node, and we're gonna pull the saturation back just slightly, but we're gonna keep it up in the node before so that we can send as much information to these parallel nodes as possible. That's gonna help us if we're pulling any keys or if we need to make any qualifications. So again, back into the look, I'm gonna push a little bit more blue into the sky. And let's go ahead and switch this to a wipe, just because I want to be able to use a little more of the frame here to see what our skin tones are looking like. All right, so now I'm going to be taking my gain here, and we kind of have these purple skies from our reference. I'm not exactly going to match that. Also, we're at sunset instead of midday, so it's a very different look that we'd be after there. But I think we can kind of get it there just using our gain, pulling it a little bit more towards blue, and then taking our gamma and just warming this up. Lift, let's see where lift should go. I mean, we're getting a lot of different results based on where we pull it. We could go right here, sitting a little bit more towards green, and then pull our gamma back towards blue, but I like the gamma where it's at, so let's just keep working with the lift. I'm gonna take that lift also towards a little bit more yellow, and then I'm gonna go into my log wheels, and here we're gonna pull it more towards blue. And this is just gonna be affecting the very lower regions of the image here. So let's look at what that node did. There's just a little bit of difference there, nothing too strong. I don't think our skin tones need too much work. We could go ahead, let's turn off split screen, and let's just get a general qualification so we can kind of balance out these skin tones. They're a little bit green, a little bit desaturated in some instances, but also a little bit dark. So let's go ahead and go into color, presets, 6 vector red, and let's see what that qualification gave us. A little bit too much sky, so we're gonna take our luminance and our high range and pull this down. And also our saturation, we're gonna pull that low end down. And let's widen out our qualification here. And then we'll add some denoising just to make it all look a little bit smoother. So I can see we didn't quite get her face in that one. So I'm gonna do an interesting trick here, and that is make one more parallel node. Then I'm gonna go into add node and then add in a key mixer. We're gonna take this key along with our second key, and then we need to actually add a serial. And I'm gonna send that key mixer information into the serial node here. And what the key mixer does is it takes multiple keys and then combines them, and then you can send that as an output into a different node. So let's see exactly how I'm gonna use that. I'm gonna zoom in here, and I'm gonna pull a new key for her face, highlight this to see what we have. And it's really getting a whole lot more than what I wanted, so let's refine this some more. Pulling back on our width. Saturation, we're gonna bring up that low soft, and pull the high end down. High soft. And it's okay if we have anything overlapping, but that looks pretty good. We're gonna go ahead and denoise this one as well. And now this is our overall key. And you can see it did a really good job of getting everybody's skin tones. It's not too blotchy. If we were to denoise it earlier on, we'd have an even better result. But let's go ahead and start working in this node now. And let's just bring up the overall exposure some. Gonna use our gamma here. So just to pop them out some, not too much. And then push a little bit more magenta. Especially in her skin. I'm gonna go into this node individually. Awesome. And now we can see the difference that makes. That really just kind of really brings them out. Overall sets a better tone for the image we're going for. All right, so if you didn't catch that, a little recap, all I did was make 2 separate nodes to pull 2 different keys that both gave us the common output of what we wanted to work on, which was everyone's skin tone in the image. Because they are so different, we couldn't use just one key. So to work on the skin tones as a whole, we pulled 2 different keys, combined them into one key mixer, and then had a common output, which we were able to affect globally. So this one actually didn't even use the second node there. So all this was done in like 3 or 4 nodes. There's really not much to it, but let's look at the difference between this one I created using the reference image and the one I just used based on my own judgment. So very, very different images. I think it's very hard to argue that the one I created originally did a better job of creating that summer warm feel, possibly a romantic feel, than the one where I had the reference on hand. I mean, just look at the contrast, for example. I left the shadows up pretty high. The reference I was looking at had them crushed, and it works. It really works. This is just kind of what I wanted, the story I wanted to tell. And obviously this isn't perfect. There's a billion more corrections I could make if I wanted to spend that time, but that's not the purpose of this video. The purpose of this video is to show you how different the path is of creating that look when you have a reference image that can kind of guide you and get you out of your habits. And as you can see, that's exactly what happened here. I may have exaggerated a little bit with that first look, just with how laxed I was at creating it, but that's not too far off from the kind of differences I would see originally when I started grading between just creating something off the top of my dome and actually using a reference still to guide my decision making. And I think you're gonna see very similar results. And that's exactly why I encourage a lot of beginners to go out and do those look recreations, because you won't believe how many small things you'll pick up on accident by just trying to recreate something. A great example in this one right here is raising up my lift, which brought the entire low range up, and then just kind of qualifying the bottom of that low range with the log wheels and pulling that down a little bit. That's something I don't typically do in my own grades, but because of the reference, it was a step of the process and it led to a great result. So I'll be sure to link Film Grabs down below so you can go check out all the stills on their website, as well as a few others that I use often. Film Grabs doesn't have everything, but if you use some other sites, you may find exactly what you're looking for. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it wasn't too long, and hopefully you learned something from it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and follow me on Instagram for all kinds of upload updates. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video.